Am I an idiot? I might be an idiot. This upcoming YouTube rewind was probably one of the most hyped up rewinds of them all. I was excited for this rewind. I thought it could have actually been good. But there it is. It's different. It's crafty. It's doomed. YouTube Rewind can never be good again, and that's because of a handful of reasons. From a practical perspective, a conceptual one, a social one, and just with how the internet works these days, YouTube can never win. Obviously, we all know that YouTube Rewind 2018 is the most disliked video on the entire platform, breaking all kinds of records. It was inaccurate, cringy, force-feeding, and generally unsettling for pretty much everyone involved. And it was the biggest turning point for the idea that YouTube was on a rapid decline in both how the company acts and presents itself, as well as in how YouTube Rewind as a whole was progressing. I mean, it's been a while now, but remember we were once perturbed by YouTube Rewind 2017 as well. It may not have been as bad, but there were certainly elements within it that rubbed us the wrong way. So this year, YouTube took a particularly interesting leap in a new direction. It tackled and acknowledged the controversy head on, and made YouTube Rewind 2019 as an entire reaction to the previous year. This time starting off on that response, speaking directly to its viewers and melting down the formula into the numerics of what is objectively liked to be as uncontroversial as possible. And it's still pretty controversial. You know, I was planning on making a joke about how I wasn't in this rewind, so I green screened myself in instead, but this format just completely tarnishes that whole idea. So instead, I inserted myself into shots throughout this video. Here's what I look like, so try finding them all. YouTube Rewind 2019 has a pretty significant split going on in its reactions, and understandably so. This rewind was unlike anything we were expecting and much different to what many people were wanting. It's ironic, really. But before we get to that, we must first rewind back to YouTube Rewind's very origins, to a time I'm gonna call the classic era. Oh, it's the same. Yes, that's right. You may not have known this, but YouTube Rewind has been a decade-long tradition at this point, starting way back in 2010 with a simple top 10 video. Well, I say simple, it's actually quite a mashup of edits cramming them all together, but when looking back on the simpler times of then, people aren't angry. In fact, people found it kinda humble. Back when the backlash of Rewind 2018 was freshly brewing, I watched a handful of video essays on it, and they too agreed that these small starts were nice. The simplicity of their design in comparison to the cacophony of later on was a breath of fresh air. YouTube Rewind 2011 even went on to continue the simple formula with the added upgrade of introducing a host with no other than Rebecca Black. She may have been hit with hate back then, but here she's just sweet. She doesn't say much, the video does most of the talking, with a montage of all stars up front, and then onto the list. There's a brief element of political news in the middle, and then a nice little message at the very end. I don't know if it's how the music ends or what, but somehow the way this one ends always puts a nice little smile on my face. Speaking of smiles, I've now officially reached over 100,000 subscribers on this little platform, so thank you so much for all of your support. It truly means everything to me. And if you're not subscribed already, go do it. I can see the percentages. Next year, 2012 rocks in with an entirely new format that kickstarts YouTube Rewind into a whole new golden era. And hey, it comes with an extended title too now. This era lasted until about 2016 and is very much the Rewind style we all know and love. Of course, they're not entirely without their own flaws either. 2012 gave us a brilliant combo of YouTube personalities appearing in music video originals, performing and crossing over with other popular icons of YouTube from that year. And part of the charm of the whole idea, I feel, is the lack of explanation. For the most part, you have to decipher the references and connections yourself. Freddie W and Corridor Digital were on a massive rise in 2012, and while their characters did include Halo and Minecraft, the year was also a big time for those games. And in general, the crossover of personalities with real music videos is a welcome addition. It's only missing PewDiePie. So Outburst 2013 with him mentioned and all, and even more references with even more people, and a narrative of a rewind button connecting it all, and it gives you the greatest rewind of the decade. 2014 followed up with more of the same, though the outer context of YouTube getting more corporate is slowly showing with more and more late night hosts making an appearance. But the super mashup of like 10 songs made for a unique and always pumping backing track for the whole retrospective. 2015 also knocked it out of the park with more representation from non-English channels, as well as giving certain genres more specific sections. making it feel both bigger than before, yet more personal and closely connected at the same time. And every creator getting some kind of screen time, and an extra homage to further back in time. And 2016 was the last of this era, with upgraded production quality on those VFX, with a narrative of YouTube spreading and upgrading its surroundings. And hey, more references to pop culture iconic moments. Nice. And then 2017, and from here it's clear that the small YouTube community is no longer what YouTube is anymore. Big corporations are taking the lead, music videos are extended and non-crossovery, literally just more of the same with new faces. Creators had their time wasted for sometimes 3 frames of screen time in cold slime. Memes appeared, which is nice, but they were reused and overexposed, and the social commentary element was mashed into the middle more glaringly. And the presentation showed it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you're popular, you're in. Though animation made an appearance, which is cool. And 2018, well, I'm sure you know how that one goes. Celebrities, fakeness, a lot of dialogue, social commentary, and very little references. It certainly wasn't subtle. And so looping back around, we come back to 2019. Is it really a new era? Maybe it's still in the declining stage, and maybe it's the start of a time when YouTube tries to backtrack to the good old days in a way that's simply less humble than back then. If YouTube Rewind 2019 is the new direction for YouTube, then it simply won't work. And I don't think at this point, anything can work. YouTube Rewind 2019 is objective. The reason it is so split is because it sacrifices a lot to give us a little. There's no cringe this time around, no social commentary, no force-fed moments, and no one we can objectively despise. The worst parts of the last 2 years are gone. But at the same time, the personal elements, the creative outletting, the mashup approach, and the visual crossovers were similarly trashed to meet this middle ground. This rewind is better than 2018, it's better than 2017 too, but due to its controversial nature and lack of humbleness, it doesn't stand to be better than even the basic foundation YouTube Rewind was built on. I mean, it literally starts out with a passive-aggressive message to the viewers that says, "Here, you like this, don't you? Well, this is what you're getting, Merry Christmas." As if it's our fault that YouTube Rewind has been declining to reach this point. Now, this top 10 format does do some things right. There are parts I genuinely like. Some genres get more of a highlight than before, which is cool to see. Obviously, not everything could make it this time, but it's something. There's a whole segment about new YouTubers rising this year, which is fantastic to see being put in the spotlight. Holy hell, these people got over 1 million in a year? I thought I was exploding for doubling to 100k in 3 months. That is insane. How unbalanced and unlucky can YouTube be? And showing off other country accolades is something I bet most of us would have never found out otherwise. But of course, there are a lot of flaws with this new rewind as well. This may be an improvement over the recent, but this rewind is probably the most boring of the entire decade. Statistics aren't interesting. And the editorial approach to this list leaves something to be desired especially. There were also many elements that were omitted from this rewind that were sinful to be avoided. Sure, we would have loved our memes back and those pop culture connections, but something as simple as remembering those who left a massive hole in certain communities on the platform seemed like an absolute must to be featured in some form this year, and it being avoided just to hit this grey normalism is just beyond heartbreaking. And ironically enough, the whole corporate takeover from the last couple years wasn't even resolved this time around, and in fact expanded more than ever now. While we dislike the fake persona YouTube was creating for its platform to show off to investors, this version only acts to highlight even more how corporate and investor-tailored YouTube has come, with it literally showing off the numbers to garner more money for being higher than its competitors. In that regard, it's only gotten worse. So what can be done? How can YouTube Rewind be done right? Well, it can't. To put it simply, the times have just changed too much. This 2019 version was an attempt to reimagine the classic era, and it simply doesn't work. Back in 2010, YouTube was a force to be reckoned with, sure, but it was still fairly humble. Production quality wasn't at the forefront of attention, and being a little amateur was just part of the vibe. Nowadays, being amateur cannot be perceived as anything other than lazy, especially for a multi-billion-dollar company that has clearly shown its professionalism in the past. And that laziness only acts to feel like a spit in the face of viewers. Not to mention, with each year getting bigger and bigger, it just feels wrong to make the size of the compilation at the end of it being a much smaller and efficient project. It's a lack of balance that'll never impress anyone again. So forget the classic era, what if YouTube moved ahead by going back to the golden era? The kind of YouTube rewinds we want and would expect for each upcoming year. Well, honestly, that's not gonna fly either anymore. These rewind compilations were all about showcasing the YouTube community within YouTube's best. But in all honesty, YouTube isn't a community anymore. It is a massive international conglomerate of several genred themes. These videos were so great because they were still relatively small-scaled. At the beginning, we could recognize everyone because our community was much more close-knit. But over time, there were more niches to acknowledge, and that became increasingly impossible to provide for. Other countries started getting bigger and bigger hits, and this all-English approach simply didn't represent what YouTube actually was. Many icons and video types went unnoticed in most other places, with only Rewind introducing us these pieces at the end of the year. As YouTube grew more, it became impossible to fit everyone in, and any attempt to do so to satisfy the most amount of people would lead into more anger, ironically, with the overcramming of creators to tick off the massive checklist. It was getting too big and too hard to follow. All of which leads to the declining era, when how we saw YouTube and how YouTube actually was clearly separate. Now sure, the whole dialogue-focused political social element was more of a directorial choice that didn't go well, that was clearly the defining factor of the era. Even still, going back to this era without that couldn't work because the giantism of YouTube would still overbear the screen. Even if slowed down on people and shown in ideals instead, it's still just too much, too fast, and too unwanted altogether. So what else can YouTube do? Well, a common suggestion that was brought up prominently back in 2017 is regional-specific rewinds. Not enough of what you want to see? Give them a dedicated smaller project. A USA rewind, a UK rewind, or heck, maybe even the genres themselves. A gaming rewind, dance rewind, film rewind, And that's a nice idea, but in its own right comes with flaws. One, of course, being that perhaps YouTube doesn't want to be a series of segregated genres, and rather a mass collection of all of those things. They may be different, but they're all connected by YouTube, and that's the point. On top of that, the budgeting could be an issue too. How many rewinds a year would be expected? 4? 12? One for every genre on the site? Do those unrepresented get their own together? Is there a central big one? The issue of representation would only get more mixed, and that budget would rise to potentially more than the fully priced single rewind. Ah, but screw it, YouTube has billions. Whichever way you spin it, not everyone can be satisfied. There are too many people to cover, too many topics to touch, a hard balance of fantasy and reality, and hitting that dopamine-inducing feeling after watching Rewind, which 2019 is particularly lacking in. And you know what? Let's go back to that 2019 Rewind. Now, let's imagine this is the new norm and there's nothing we can do about it. You know the feeling, it's just like the algorithm, right? What can be improved from this foundation to make a better Rewind next time? Well, for one, I think this video can be upgraded much like 2011 outshined 2010. Give us a host, or more than that, give us several, with one representing each list in their own unique way. Something to give a little more personality and creator sense out of the Rewind beyond just highlighting the content. Just a couple simple messages of wholesomeness and we're good. Keep out that passive-aggressive attitude and just don't mention the extra context at all. Just focus on the good of that year. I found just talking about 2018 this year to be cringy somehow. Another thing that really misses out this year only is the soundtrack. Each list is given a one-track backing, which is about as boring and basic as you can get. In the past, we've had great mashup remixes, and this year I also discovered those crazy meme mashups that combine even more songs with the same tempo. Now, I'm not exactly asking for something as chaotic as that, but bring back those remixes to represent more in a timely manner. And hey, YouTube clearly wants to make social messages on its platform, why not keep them more inwards with a section about YouTubers of the past? Something in the middle that means we can actually feel some emotions and correctly celebrate those that meant so much to us that have now passed. Minimize the dialogue wherever possible. Obviously kinda hard with a lot of hosts, but don't tell some narrative, show it. And no text dialogue either, it still counts. and be subtle where you can. My favorite part of the older rewinds is trying to work out every piece, shown only visually. And really, just respect the creators. 2019 was content over creator more than ever, and that's not fair. It's spit with a bitter tongue and isn't even the worst case of disrespecting creators we've seen. But being respectful should be the center of everything. And more references, sure. Or hey, want an entirely new format? Combine the lists with these dancey skip moments. Give each list a scene, throw in the relevant creators with crossed over references, have each list member appear on screen maybe with their content, and then move on to the next list. Like a celebration of each genre with creators recreating it as a community. Throw in bonus references from runner-ups just being in the scene and you're as good as gold. Or just go back to 2013, I don't know. YouTube is a complex beast and no one really knows what they're doing. Go back, just go back. YouTube Rewind is a lost cause and no one can be happy anymore. I have a YouTuber friend now. He goes by the name of Tyser and he's currently rebranding his channel to something he enjoys more, a little like me a little while ago. He's also made a video about YouTube Rewind, so go and check it out and tell him I sent you. It's a new start for him, so send him as much support as you can. And thanks again for 100,000 subscribers. I love you all. For now, my name's been Dazz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. Those people seriously got over 1 million in a year? That's crazy! But if Rewind goes back to live action, I'm totally gunning for a spot next year. Maybe it's actually possible. I have no idea.